Alright, what up people? It's your boy Chig from Guna Evil Eye coming to you again with a brand new video. This time is to talk about the favourites to be the next Arsenal manager and what my honest opinion of them is. And this currently bet on the odds that are currently displayed in the Evening Standard. So this ain't my personal list. I want to make that clear because there are a couple of names in there I'm a bit like, what the fuck, where did they get that from? And I just want to make it clear that is not my list. Now, first things first, let's talk about the list. So there are some names where they have certain managers that feature on this list that I think could be an interesting choice. Some I'm a bit surprised by the odds by, quite frankly. And then there are other managers on this list I just think to myself, someone's either trolling or taking the piss. So you're about to see, as I talk about this list, who I think... not only who I think would be my favourite, but who I think would end up getting the job, based on rumours and suspicion. So let me start off with Paulo Fonseca. So currently he's 33-1, 45-year-old man who is currently the manager of Shakhtar Donetsk in the Russian league, the Ukrainian league, one of the two. Knowledge, I know. I mean, from what I can tell, he seems to conduct himself very well. He's also one of the favourites to replace Sam Allardyce because, I think there's a big rumour at the moment that the fans are not happy with the football that's going on at Everton, so they're looking at potentially just freshening up that situation. So they're very much looking at this Paulo Fonseca guy. Could be a genius move, who knows? But I think a job like this should go to a slightly more experienced manager who has managed a top level team, not just a team in a league where only one or two people are going to compete. I want to see this manager really have some. If they don't have Arsenal connections and they're not experienced, I don't really understand why you would link them to us. So to me, I know people will bang on about the fact that no one knew who Arsene Wenger was. Cool, but those type of success stories are much more few and far between than the ones who are from nowhere and actually do. Sorry, are few and far between. There are a lot more stories about managers who come from nowhere, given a chance, and they still do shit. So I'd rather a tried and tested formula than one that may fail us. So for me, Paulo Fonseca, no thanks. You can keep your 33-1. Next on the list is Julian Nagelsmann, who is the Hoffenheim manager. Young manager as well. He's 30 years old. Really meant to be the shit. Like, he's meant to be the next big thing. Very Pep-esque in the way that his teams play football, but they also, on top of playing attractive football, they are a very capable team. This is probably this is the gambler's choice, I think. This is the one where if you thought to yourself, you know what, I want a really exciting choice, let me go after him. This would be the choice of manager that you'd go for. To me, this is not the person I want. I just want someone with a little more experience. Someone that's going to tell the likes of Mesut Ozil when he decides that, you know what, I don't feel like playing because I'm up in Stoke. No, motherfucker, you paid £350,000 a week. I don't care if you stubbed your big toe the day before. You're going to go out there and you're going to kick some ball. So maybe in a few years, maybe he's your next manager after this one. But not quite yet for him. So for me, 25-1 probably seems about right. I don't see it being very likely. Next up is actually Patrick Vieira, again at 25-1. For me, and I've always said this, right? Now I know there have been a lot of people who have voiced about the fact that they don't want anyone who was a former Arsenal player, former Arsenal anything, anywhere near the club. And to be honest, I get their logic. I get the logic of the fact that, when it comes to removing these guys because they're underperforming, you're going to be faced with a very similar situation to an Arsene Wenger, whereby because they're a legend of the club, people won't look at it as objectively as they should. And I agree, because our fans are really weird and wishy-washy like that. So I agree with that point to a certain extent. And I wouldn't personally... My reason for not wanting a Patrick Vieira or a Thierry Henry, who I'll come on to, or a Mikel Arteta... Well, Arteta's a slightly different reason. But the reason why I don't want these guys on is for the one simple reason: they ain't had enough experience. If they had capable experience, no problem. I'd have no problem them taking the reins and doing the job. But none of them are capable of doing what is necessary in order to have the experience required to take over at a club like this. So, to me, I think with Vieira, I love the fact that Vieira would be a good number 2. Out of all the people that I mentioned, I think he's the most capable, strong personality. Someone that, other than Dennis, actually, who, let's face it, doesn't fly, but at least with Dennis, he has the experience. But I actually think Patrick Vieira would make an excellent number 2. More so than Henry. More so than Arteta. I wouldn't necessarily want to see that as a number 1. To me, I don't mind the idea of having a former Arsenal person in there. I think some of these players need to understand what it takes to be an Arsenal a player or individual, or know what that badge means. And I think someone like Vieira would be a perfect messenger, perfect vehicle for that. So that's the reason why I'd love him as a number 2, but not necessarily as a number 1. And if he's committed to being a number 1, then he should stay where he is and continue learning the trade. So no thanks to Patrick Vieira. Which brings me on to Thierry Henry, kind of copy and paste. I think the idea of Henry coming in and taking over the club is more of a romantic one. But there's nothing about him that makes me think like, oh yeah, he'd be ideal for the situation. If he was to come in on board, I'd support him, of course. But to me, it's never been an attractive proposition. I think in terms of, if your idea was, oh, he'd be excellent for getting players, all right, cool. I kind of understand where you're coming from, because he brings so much gravitas. He brings some, whether you like to admit it or not, people come to the club because they want to emulate what Henry has done. You heard what Aubameyang said. You heard what Lacazette said when they came in this season. You know, Thierry Henry was a character that I would imagine every striker at some point or another has looked up to. So the idea of coming to Arsenal and trying to fulfill that is a draw. And whether you want to admit it or not, and I was an Arsene Wenger hater, a lot of people who came to the club wanted to play for someone as legendary as Arsene Wenger. And that's the one thing that Thierry Henry coming in would give. A lot of gravitas, a lot of natural draw to the club. And that's what I do like about him coming on board. Having said all of that, I don't think he's capable of being a number 2. I'm not overly impressed with the way Belgium play football. And alright, I know a lot of that has to do with Roberto Martinez, but just the same way that Steve Boulder's getting heat at the moment for the way Wenger kicks ball, you've got to do the same thing to fucking Thierry Henry for Belgium. So for me, no thank you. No, not Thierry Henry, and 25-1 represents that nicely. Coming to the next person on the list. Now, I am very surprised his odds are so long, because actually, in my opinion, he's third favourite on that list. And that is Leonardo Jardim. He is currently the Monaco manager, and Monaco have all but admitted that he is likely to leave at the end of the season. Someone who plays very attractive football, who has won in the French league before, who has managed big characters, big egos, have managed a team with tight budget restraints, and have unfortunately been forced to sell their players, and is still expected to compete in the higher echelons of the game. Someone who I think our players would thrive under, playing his style of football, would tick a lot of what the board wants in terms of style of football. To me, he'd be my third favourite on the list. I would love it if he took over. Young guy as well. I think he's mid-40s, 43, 44, something like that. Someone who I think could do the job and do it well. Very surprised that he's only 22-1. If we haven't made an appointment within the next 2 weeks, I would expect those odds to shorten dramatically. So I'd keep an eye on that one. It's 22-1 at the moment. I wouldn't mind having a sneaky £2 bet on that. I'll tell you. I wouldn't mind. So let's see what happens. Joachim Low is the next one on the list. Currently at 16-1. Now I've skipped one in between that because I think that's a troll, but maybe I should come back to that after this, so I will do the exact same ones. But 16-1 is Joachim Low, Germany manager. One that a lot of Arsenal fans would quite like. They believe that he's someone that can get the best out of Mesut, even though he hasn't really done that for the Germany squad. Someone who is reasonably young, who is a winner. He's won the World Cup. You have to say he's a winner. He's won the European Cup. So this is someone who knows what he's doing as far as international countries go. And that's where I have my problem. If you're talking about managing, like if we're talking about him being the next Nigeria manager, I'd roll out the red carpet for this motherfucker. Of course. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about club management. And I think club management is vastly different to international management. And to me, in my opinion, I've always felt this way. I don't think he'd do a good job. My gut feeling tells me he wouldn't do a good job. My gut feeling tells me for all those people who are annoyed that Ozil has it all his own way at the moment, I don't see that shit changing under him. So to me, Joachim Low, no thank you. Next up, and this is one of the trolls, which is why you can see I skipped this. Believe it or not, I shit you not, Gary Megson is on this list at 16-1. I'd be shocked if he was on the list for Everton. How much more us? And he's only 16-1. I don't know. I don't know what to say. This to me is more of a joke one than Brendan Rodgers. At least with Brendan Rodgers, he's won some shit. No. I'm not even going to discuss his candidacy. No. Next up, Mikel Arteta. Now, for me, you can, to a certain extent, copy and paste everything I said about Patrick Vieira and Thierry Henry and apply it to Arteta. For me, I'd go a slightly different way with Arteta, in the sense that if I had a choice between Patrick Vieira or Thierry Henry, spoiler alert, he'd be the last of the three I'd consider. I don't care how much of a big thing or a special thing he's supposed to be. I can quite conceivably see him leaving Man City and going to manage Everton, because he has played for Everton a lot. So I could see that being more likely than him taking over at the Arsenal job. But at 12-1, I find it interesting that people are being linked with him. Supposedly, he doesn't get on with a lot of people at Arsenal. A lot of the players thought he was very, very arrogant. And I think that kind of contributed to the fact that when he did leave, there weren't a lot of good luck messages that went out to him, which is very telling in itself. So yes, for me, Arteta, no thanks. 12-1. Brendan Rodgers is 11-1. Supposedly the man that Ivan Gazidis is a huge fan of, and the one he personally wants to take over the job, which goes to show you about Ivan fucking Gazidis and his judgment. Listen, I have to give Ivan some credit. He eventually had the talk with Wenger that he should have had last season. But with Brendan Rodgers, hey, he almost once helped Liverpool to win the title, a Premier League title. Barring a slip, probably would have went on to do that. He's won titles at Celtic, I guess. That seems to be the CV that people are talking about. It's like people are talking about when they want to defend the Rodgers thing as well. He almost helped Liverpool win a title. Alright, I almost had a blowjob this morning. What difference? what are you talking about? What are we talking about here? Almost doesn't fucking cut it. That's the whole point that we're getting rid of Wenger. It doesn't matter what you almost did. It's what you have done. Isn't that the idea, to get winners on board? No, thank you. Brendan Rodgers 11-1. So now we're starting to look at the main favourites for the job. And believe it or not, more than Brendan Rodgers, Eddie Howe is more of a favourite than Brendan Rodgers now at 9-1. To me, I like Eddie Howe a lot. I actually think for his sake, he needs to leave Bournemouth, but not necessarily to fucking come and manage at Arsenal. If I'm Everton, I'm looking at Eddie Howe. Why not? He's young, he's ambitious, will help him play more decent football, will still have the defensive rigidness that I would expect Everton to have. He's English as well, so I think he'll get a lot of response out of people like Theo Walcott for them, Wayne Rooney for them, and build like a bit of a British core, which they already have, really. They've got some nice, exciting youngsters coming through. They just need to organise them a little bit better. Also at 9-1 is Sean Dyche. For the same reason as Eddie Howe, someone who perhaps needs to move from Burnley, just to further his own ambition. Good manager, but not a manager you necessarily want to see take over at Arsenal. I could see someone like at Everton going for him as well. Pretty much for all the reasons I just said about Eddie Howe. I think Eddie Howe will have more exciting football than Sean Dyche. So they may think, well, why do we want to swap current Sam Allardyce for a new Sam Allardyce? I think that's doing Sean Dyche a little bit of injustice, really, because you know what? All right, yesterday aside, all right, we smacked Burnley up 5-0. But they've actually played some decent football, Burnley. They have. And they've only really been destroyed by us, to be fair. So, to be honest, for me, no thank you to either one of them, but I think they would be good choices. Carlo Ancelotti is currently 6-1. Currently without a club. His previous club was at Bayern Munich until he got dismissed by them. Someone who a lot of people still believe he has it. I know Lee Gunner, who's often on this show, is a massive fan of Carlo Ancelotti. Someone he desperately wants us to sign. Me, I'm not as convinced. He's probably fourth on my list of people who I'd want to take over. Hey, if he was to take over, I'd be more than happy. Because he's experienced, he's won trophies, a bit older than a lot of the people I'm talking about. So, I mean, when you compare Eddie Howe, who I think is late 30s, Sean Dyche was his early 40s, and then Carlo Ancelotti, who I think is 59. We're talking about big differences here. But someone who is experienced enough and has the respect enough that he'll get the respect from the players. And I think they'll teach him how to play football. He feels like, and this might be harsh to say, and I know Lee will hate me for saying this, the one thing, Carlo Ancelotti has always felt like a bit of an uninspiring choice. He feels like a safe choice. Someone who could take over and do a competent job. I want a little bit more than competent. I want someone who can really drive the shit out of this team. And that's, to me, he just about misses the mark there. But only just about. I'll be more than happy if he came on board. But no, not for me. Next on the list is Liverpool's assistant manager. I ain't going to even try and pronounce his first name. But it's Buvac, who is seen as the brain in Klopp's setups throughout his different teams that he's been with. Someone who I think is one of these kind of Jose Mourinho when Jose was at Barca secret genius types. Someone who the papers believe has fallen out with Klopp, but what the honest truth is that apparently he's had a bereavement in the family or something like that, and Liverpool have given him some time off ahead of the Champions League final to sort that out. Papers have put 2 and 2 together, come out with 65, and suddenly he's one of the favourites for the job. Supposedly Sven is a huge fan of this guy, and this is Sven's choice of wanting the man he wants to take over from Wenger. Sven is really trying to turn us into Dortmund 2013. I'm not sure I want this geezer. I'm all for him coming on as some sort of assistant manager. As a manager, no thank you. No thanks. For various different reasons, I don't want him on board. But interesting choice. This was a story that broke a lot early last week, and only seems to be hanging around since then. So we'll see what happens, but I don't see this one happening. Then the top 3 on the list, all of whom I wouldn't mind taking over, but one of them might surprise you. I'm least encouraged to take over. So at 5-1 is Diego Simeone. Now, I know a lot of you know that this is my personal choice as someone who I would love to take over at Arsenal. The man is a winner. The idea of him gripping up Bellerin and telling him to shave his head and get out there and play some decent football gives me a semi. I am not embarrassed to tell you. To me, I would love him to take over and just shake the shit out of that club. And I hear what you guys are saying. The brand of football is important to the board because it's important to the fans. And yeah, ideally as a fan, I want to be entertained by the football I play. But as I always say to you motherfuckers, knock knock, have we been playing entertaining football the last couple of years? We ain't. I don't know about you guys, I'd rather we were in the final playing this boring football that Diego Simeone apparently plays over playing our attractive shit and knowing that we've got 3 games now to the end of the season and none of them mean fuck all. All this brand of football shit don't mean fuck all. Winning is everything. Winning is everything. And I know that's the problem is if you employ someone like a Diego Simeone, immediately half the fan base will be up in arms because of the type of football we play. To me, winning means more than all of that. So that would be my personal choice. But I know deep down, I'm actually surprised the odds are so short. There ain't no freaking way Diego Simeone is coming on board. It is what it is. Next up, and this is the man that a lot of the board, it's believed that a lot of the board want, and that is Luis Enrique at 11-2. Now, you guys may know this if you follow me on Twitter at Colossal Chig, quick plug. I've never really been a fan of the idea of him taking over. I think he plays good football. I think he's someone who's won the Champions League, so he's a winner. To me, I'm a little bit skeptical in terms of how much impact did he really have on a Barcelona team where at the time they were winning everything anyway. I am skeptical, always have been, about how much he actually contributed to that. Was someone that also fell out with Messi, so at least from that perspective, he has no problem managing big egos. I'd be happy enough if he takes over, but to me, I would not be ecstatic. He's also one of 2 of the favourites to take over as I record this video. It's come out on Sky Sports News today that they understand that he's one of 2 people that the Arsenal board want to employ. As soon as Wenger announced that he was going, he was one of the hot favourites for this job, Luis Enrique. To me, if he takes over, I'll be happy enough. He's young, plays really good football, gets his teams to play good football. I think the team would respect him based on the things that he's won, based on where he's managed. I'm just not all the way convinced he's as tactically flexible as we need him to be as an Arsenal group. Which means, personally, if I don't get Diego Simeone, the final choice is my next choice. And it's someone I've wanted to take over deep down, probably since last year. And that is Maximiliano Allegri, the current Juventus manager. Currently, the odds are 5 to 11 on to take over. There have been lots of rumours, particularly in the last 48 hours, that he's actually in talks with Juve and Arsenal over striking a deal to take over as new Arsenal manager. There have been lots of rumours for the past couple of years that he's been learning English with the view of taking over as Arsenal manager. And much like you guys, that type of shit, that's the type of shit that gets you hard. The idea that this manager, this prestigious manager, could come over and take over as Arsenal. And I told you guys from the very get-go, mark my words, when that Arsenal job becomes available, motherfuckers are gonna want that job. Now, apparently the rumour coming out today is that both Luis Enrique and Allegri have some slight concerns about this new Arsenal structure and the way it will work and how it will interfere with their job. But I don't see that being a long-term concern. When you think about the fact that Luis Enrique has worked in the Barcelona structure role where he had no real say over who was coming in and who wasn't. I imagine the Juventus situation is very much like that. I'm not an Italian guy. I'm not an Italian football guy, but for those of you who are, leave it in the comments below. But I imagine it's a very similar setup. Let's face it, that's football these days. You have your teams. You know, Wenger is really the last of a dying breed in the sense of he was the one who kind of knew who he wanted to get, told the people who were making the deal what to not spend, how much to spend. Football don't work like that. You have your list of players, cool. They also have an idea of what they want. You have your list of players, you don't need to worry about the arrangements. We'll go and get those players. Just tell me your list of players, cool, we'll go and get them. And that's the way I want the club to work. Not necessarily for them to get involved in football matters, but for them to do the part that they need to do, to be in the negotiations, to be the finance holders, and not ask the manager how much they should spend on an X player. For me, with Allegri, I think he represents everything I want in a manager. I think he'll have a good balance between playing good football, but sorting out that defence. Very tactically flexible. I think we saw that against Spurs in the Champions League this year. And I think will command respect. He will upset people too. I don't see Ozil and him particularly getting on, to be honest. But good. If it means for the betterment of the club, I have no problem with it. And I'm prepared to give whoever takes over at least 3 years to adjust and start to deliver results. The way Jurgen Klopp now is. So, my choice, my realistic choice, if I take inspiration of everything I've just said in this video, I would love for Max Allegri to come and take over Arsenal Football Club. You guys let me know what you think and all the choices I mentioned. Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you're listening to me for the first time, hit that subscribe button, drop kick, hurt the shit out of that like button, and hit that subscribe button for me, and hit that notification bell. Remember, I've got a few videos dropping over the course of this week. One of them is going to be talking about Arsene Wenger and what my true thoughts about him leaving are, and that'll be dropping on Sunday. I'll also be doing a preview for both Leicester and Huddersfield and a review for Leicester and Huddersfield. And I'll also be doing an end of season review, I'm hoping next Sunday evening. I'm just waiting for confirmation on that. So it's going to be a busy week for me. Alright people, there's your half an hour video. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care Peace.